The rain fell in relentless sheets, turning the streets of Los Angeles into a shimmering maze of reflections and shadows. MIA pulled her threadbare coat tighter around her body, her canvas bag heavy with unfinished sketches and half-written poems. The city was alive with lights and noise, but to her, it felt hollow, a place where dreams came to die. She had been walking for hours, her mind a whirlwind of doubt and despair. The gallery had rejected her work again, and with only 3 days left until rent was due, she had no idea how she was going to make it. She had poured every bit of herself into her art, hoping that one day someone would see what she saw, feel what she felt, and believe in her as much as she had once believed in herself. But after years of struggle, of balancing waitressing jobs with long nights spent sketching under the dim light of her apartment, she was beginning to wonder if the world simply didn't care. Her boots were soaked through, the cold seeping into her bones, and her breath came out in visible puffs of air as she walked. It wasn't supposed to rain today. At least, that's what the weather forecast had said. But then again, nothing ever seemed to go the way she planned. Her fingers clutched the strap of her bag, as if holding onto it could somehow keep her grounded, keep her from dissolving into the bleakness of the night. Just as she was considering giving up and heading back to her cramped apartment, she spotted a small cafe tucked between 2 towering buildings. Its warm glow stood out against the dark, stormy backdrop, its large windows fogged with the heat inside. The golden light spilling onto the wet pavement made the place seem almost unreal, a mirage in the middle of the city's cold indifference. For the first time in hours, something inside her stirred, a faint hope or maybe just a simple desire to escape the rain, if only for a little while. MIA pushed open the heavy wooden door, and the small bell above it jingled softly, announcing her arrival. The warmth inside embraced her instantly, wrapping around her like a familiar hug. The scent of coffee and freshly baked pastries filled the air, mingling with a soft hum of jazz music playing from an old radio in the corner. The cafe was nearly empty, save for a few scattered patrons, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a young couple whispering to each other over their lattes, and a barista humming under her breath as she wiped down the counter. MIA sighed, letting the exhaustion settle over her now that she was no longer fighting against the rain. She shook out her damp hair, droplets of water splashing onto the wooden floor, and was about to retreat to a quiet corner when her gaze landed on a man sitting near the window. He was tall, with dark hair falling slightly over his forehead, and he carried a quiet presence that seemed to fill the room effortlessly. He was alone, a book open in front of him, his fingers idly tracing the rim of his coffee cup as he read. It took MIA a moment to recognize him, but when she did, her breath caught in her throat. Keanu Reeves. She had seen his movies, heard the countless stories about his kindness, how he gave up his seat on the subway, how he donated millions to children's hospitals without seeking recognition, how he treated everyone, from co-stars to crew members, with the same gentle respect. But she never imagined she would see him in person, sitting in a quiet cafe on a rainy night, lost in a book like any ordinary person. He wasn't surrounded by an entourage, no security detail hovering around him. He was just there, present in the moment, exuding an air of quiet thoughtfulness. MIA hesitated. She didn't want to intrude, didn't want to be that person who disrupted a celebrity's peace. But just as she was about to turn away, he looked up, their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to pause. There was no arrogance in his gaze, no trace of celebrity entitlement, just a quiet warmth, an unspoken understanding. It was as if, in that single glance, he saw the exhaustion in her, the weariness she carried, and acknowledged it without judgment. "You look like you could use a warm drink," he said, his voice smooth yet gentle, carrying the weight of someone who had seen and understood life in all its complexities. "Join me." MIA hesitated, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. She was drenched, her hair a mess, her bag dripping water onto the floor. She probably looked like someone who had been wandering the streets without purpose, which, in a way, she had, but there was something in his voice, something kind and sincere, that made it impossible to refuse. She nodded slowly, stepping forward and sliding into the seat across from him, her fingers trembling as she set her bag down. Keanu signaled to the waiter, ordering a hot tea for her without even asking what she wanted. It wasn't intrusive. It felt natural, like an unspoken gesture of kindness. MIA wrapped her hands around the warm cup when it arrived, letting the heat seep into her cold fingers. "You're an artist," he said after a moment, glancing at her bag. It wasn't a question. MIA nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. I try to be, but it's hard. No one seems to care about what I create. Keanu leaned back, studying her with quiet intensity. Art isn't about who cares, he said. It's about what you need to say. The world will catch up eventually. She wanted to believe that. She really did. But years of rejection had worn her down. She sighed, shaking her head. It doesn't feel that way. Keanu took a sip of his coffee before speaking again. I know how it feels. To pour everything into something and wonder if it's enough. MIA frowned slightly. But you've made it. He chuckled softly. I wasn't always. He told her about his early struggles, about the countless auditions that ended in rejection, about being told he wasn't the right fit, about losing roles to bigger names. And then, his voice softened as he spoke of his personal losses, his best friend, his daughter, the love of his life. He spoke of grief not as something to be feared, but as something that shaped him, something that taught him the value of kindness. Kindness isn't about grand gestures, he said. It's about seeing people, really seeing them. That's what changes things. MIA listened, her heart swelling with something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. When it was time to leave, Keanu quietly paid for her drink and handed her a folded napkin. Keep creating, he said with a small smile. The world needs your voice. She watched as he walked out into the rain, his figure disappearing into the night. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the napkin. A handwritten note stared back at her. Your art matters. Don't give up. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the napkin to her chest. And in that moment, something shifted inside her. She didn't know how, but she knew she would keep going. Because if someone like Keanu Reeves believed in her, maybe, just maybe, she could believe in herself again. As she left the cafe, the rain didn't feel quite as cold. It no longer felt like the end of something, but rather the beginning. And somewhere deep inside her, a spark had been reignited, flickering to life once more. The world had not changed, but she had.